Next, we'll get right to the DOT files of record keeping and how it is affecting the new investigation and audit protocols. And this is going to be with Ryan Byers, who grew up in Pea Green and is a former state trooper and has lots of experience. So, Ryan, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you. I always looking for reasons to come out to Grand Junction to see everybody. Now, just so everybody's aware, in the chat feature of the Zoom call, I did upload some files. I'm going to switch to those just really quick before we get started. I put in just a couple things. The updated short haul flow charts. We have the CDL driver one, which has reflects the changes as of September 29th of 2020. Please feel free to download this, use it for, training internally, compliance internally. We still have a lot of people getting the short haul incorrect. So I did, of course, include that. We also kind of revamped the short haul for non-CDL drivers as of September 29th. That rule, excuse me, didn't change, but I did go through to update it. And I never really had put in the 16-hour day scenario into that flow chart if you have one of my older versions of it. The reason being is I was always fearful, especially of my clients, to just automatically scheduling 16-hour days. And I don't want to have 70-hour violations. That does happen with the short haul. We also included just a couple other flow charts for you. The DOT compliance for intrastate commerce and interstate commerce. We are still seeing a lot of people that'll jump and run across the state line, utilizing the exceptions that the state of Colorado provides, and then they find out once they're over that state line that there are some problems there. And then finally, just the CDL flow chart. We remastered our version just to kind of match the one that the feds and everybody are using with their training and that type of thing. So with that, I'll go ahead and get going into the PowerPoint now. So we're going to be talking a little bit about files and record keepings, how it's affected the new investigation and the audit protocols, during the COVID-19 era. Again, my name is Ryan Byers. I'm Front Range Compliance Services and DOT University. A couple links. You have our website there at frontrangecompliance.com to check out our information and get some links. We also have some forms and information that's available to you there. The forms that I did provide are also there, so you could go there to download that information. And please feel free to email or call us if you have questions. We do have an open door policy when it comes to those types of questions. So 2020, a massive disruption to compliance programs. 2020 started off like normal. We were busy. Everybody was scheduled, and then a couple months into it, the whole world just got disrupted due to the COVID. And one of the unfortunate things that did happen was, enforcement got sidelined. And no, I know we've got a couple enforcement officers on here. I'm a former enforcement officer, so don't take this personal. But a lot of companies, were kind of excited that, hey, you know what? There's less enforcement going on. We can run. Some companies really took advantage of those situations, and just kind of really dropped their DOT compliance programs and that. Hopefully nobody on this call, happened to do that. But we definitely saw, quite a few big changes that had happened, due to the just, run and try to keep your business going. And compliance and COVID, the new normal. Over the last year, I think I've grown to hate that term. People say the new normal. But it really did kind of change the DOT program, the way they're doing audits and that kind of thing. In the month of March, we went through, I think, 6 compliance audits just for March alone, of local companies that we work with or new companies that came to us because they had an audit. I think that's one of our records in a month, 6 audits in a month. We try to keep our clients from having to go through audits, but it's the unintended consequence, I think, that happened during COVID of a lot of people, cutting back on programs, just trying to keep trucks going at all costs. Now, some of the things that did happen, kind of with that is enforcement officers, they did kind of get sidelined. There were still some inspections, some enforcement going on, but at nowhere near at the same rate that it had happened in the past. Audits, got backed off. They weren't doing audits, period. Well, period's kind of a big statement. It had to be an extreme situation for them to come in and do an audit at either the federal side or the state side. So like I said, those were the extreme situations. over that year, they kind of went through and changed up a little bit of their program of how they're doing their DOT audits. And there's been a couple surprise factors, that I'm learning coming into this. But during that year of time, a lot of the investigators, a lot of the enforcement officials, they had time I think there was probably some more training, and they're revamping it, and it kind of refreshed a lot of their process in their mind. And kind of what we're seeing, coming into the audits now is this update of training and programs. Now, I think I went too many slides there. So no, we're good. Okay, so with that, in 2021, the compliance programs that we have, number one, the new entrant safety audit, nothing really changed in that one. But in 2019, later 2019, they started to move those all to offsite reviews. They're fairly simple, but if they go through and they see that there's rationale to justify an on-site, they will do that. They're always basing that on the violations or accidents, whatever kind of on-road performance that companies have going into that safety audit. Other than that, the new entrant safety audit is a very simple process of just uploading a few documents, and then it is good. Now, the important factor is uploading a few documents. That's kind of one of the things I want to talk about today, is just to be ready so that you can upload those documents. The offsite safety, like I said on the bottom bullet point, the offsite safety audits, they're pretty simplistic and fast paced. As long as you're ready and you have the proper documents to upload them, it's going to be pretty good. They're also now doing the focused reviews. That's still the same. It can be done as offsite or on-site for that focused review. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is for a focused review, when the auditor comes in or the compliance investigator comes in, they still take a snapshot of your overall general compliance. So when they say, I'm just coming in to review the vehicle maintenance, they're still going to look a little bit at your accident, and they're going to look at your drug and alcohol, that kind of thing. And then they can always go through and choose to expand into those other topics, whatever program that they feel is going on. So when they're taking that snapshot, if they review something and they find a violation, they can expand, their audit. So again, that's one of those things. If you're just going through a focus, be prepared. I do get phone calls of people saying, "Hey, why do they want to see this? They're just here for vehicle maintenance," and that is very normal for them to expand to that. Now, one of the biggest changes that we have, or the biggest changes, is the comprehensive audit. That's where they do the full-blown compliance investigation. That has always been done, for the history of the audit program, by officers coming into your office. Well, one of the redevelopments due to COVID-19 is now they have the option of doing that as an offsite investigation. It's the same process, or it's the same investigation, but a completely different process. Every document the auditor is going to request has got to be uploaded electronically. They do have, ways, of course, that you can fax stuff into a number and things like that. But it's going to be you're going to be ahead of the program, if you have your documents already set up for electronic format and that type of thing. There are during these audits, there are going to be additional documents requested. So what'll happen is they will come through and they're going to put out a general request saying you need to have everything ready. And they'll give you a list of what they want to have uploaded. And then as they get those documents, they will then submit a request to you for other documents. And that'll go on until they receive everything that they need. What we're seeing is these comprehensive investigations can take sometimes up to 2 to 3 weeks. That doesn't mean you're going to have contact with that officer solid for 2 to 3 weeks. It's going to be hit and miss. Sometimes it feels like, the auditor has 2 or 3 audits going on at one time, but they also, every time they do a document request, they give you a specific timeline to have those documents uploaded to them. The sooner that you're able to comply and get those documents, then that will go through and shorten up that time. We have had the comprehensive offsite investigations take anywhere 1 to 2 days, all the way up to 3 weeks, depending on the client that we're working with. and how difficult it is to get those files and what their organization is. Now they also are doing the comprehensive on-site investigations, and typically it's going to be left to the officer's decision of when they want to come in. If the company has a severe and uncertain safety record, they can demand an on-site. They can to come in. Typically they're going to base that on the types of violations that they have, the types of interaction that they have with the company when they're initially speaking to you, to find out how they're going to do the investigation. If they feel like the company is going to be trying to cheat the program, or pencil whip things to get stuff in there, they most definitely can come into the office. But they are, like I said, they're doing both, so you want to go through and be prepared. So in the DOT's files and record keeping, file organization is absolutely imperative. We come in, we help a lot of clients with their files and that type of thing. And almost every time when we start, either the files are at zero, like there is no files, or they have this huge paperwork mess, just papers everywhere. And we've got to go through and get them organized. Even if they're stuffed into the correct files, the files have got to be organized, or else it's going to be impossible to management. So you see in my little images down there, I said, which one do you want? Do you want to be the files that are completely, just chaotic and that, or do you want to take those files and get them organized, into a program? And here's the deal. You can buy fleet tracking programs, you can invest in them and everything else, but it doesn't matter how you're doing it, whether you're just using your regular files on your computer, which is what I have in the image down there, or if you're buy a software program. No matter what, any type of electronic data, data in equals the data you're going to get out. So if your files are disorganized electronically, then you're still going to be disorganized, and it's going to be, a big mess trying to keep them up. So just kind of running through to give you some examples. I don't have the time to run you through an entire DOT program, or to dive into what each of these files are. I'm definitely happy to answer any questions that we may have, afterwards. So if you do have a question, drop that in the search bar. And when I get to the end, I'll definitely open this up for questions. But using the driver's qualification file, one of the biggest files, that we have, and most important files that we have, of course, all DOT files that you're needed for your program are super important, and those maintenance files can get pretty huge and that type of thing. But again, maintenance files, when you go to the document retention requirements, it says that you have to maintain those documents for a year in that file. So it is possible to purge some of those documents. The annual inspection you have to maintain for 14 months, that kind of thing. Or the driver's qualification, there's documents in that file that you have to keep forever, from the time that you hired that driver to the end of their employment. And then you got to maintain certain documents for 3 years. And 3 years after that person leaves. So I was going to use it for an example, just to kind of show you paper file, how to get it organized, what needs to be in there. So the first thing, that we do is I teach, if you've attended one of my forms and reports classes up at CMCA, I teach a 4-file process: a driver's qualification file, number one, a drug and alcohol testing file. That one's confidential between the employee and the DER. Nobody else is supposed to have access to it. And if they need to access to it, they have to go through the DER. The confidential file for safety performance investigation, that's also a confidential file. And then last but not least, your human resources file. Now, the reason I teach 4 files, and you can have more. I've had people come to me and say, hey, Ryan, you need to actually have 6 files. Okay, that's fine. But at a minimum, I definitely recommend 4. Can you combine? Absolutely, but you've got to get organized. If you're involved in a situation, a crash, and you upload the wrong documents, and that gets sent over to somebody, one of those ambulance chasers up here in Denver. We got the strong arm Frank Azar. They get that stuff. They're going to use it against you. So in the human resources file, you could have some vacation requests. You might have some write-ups, disciplinary write-ups. Some wage garnishments. That doesn't need to be anywhere near the DOT stuff. So I definitely recommend keep it separate. And as far as that goes, the drug and alcohol, people will call me and say, well, can't we combine the drug and alcohol safety performance with the driver's qualification? And yes, there are ways to do that. Again, organization is key. But if you do that, then the only person that can have access to your driver qualification files is your DER or assistant DER. So you have to look at that program and say, well, who actually has access? If it's multiple people, then no, they do have to be split apart. So I just kind of want to dive into this. In your driver's qualification file, First one that we have, is the driver application for employment. Now here at Front Range Compliance, we kind of refer to it as the DQP, the driver's qualification packet, because it's a packet. Yes, it's if you get our full version that's got the I-9 in it, the PSP release, yeah, it's like 28 pages, okay? But we like to keep that pretty much just grouped together. And once we get the driver to either fill it out, whether they've got it set up and they can fill it out electronically, or if they fill it out by hand, we will scan that document, and we in every driver's file, we will name that the DQ or DQP, and that way we have it the same every time. The next thing that you run in there is, a copy of the driver's license. Now, I see, we will go in, the copies of the licenses get neglected, because you'll go in and you'll see the original license, but you won't see any of the updates. You want to make sure that that driver is giving you a valid copy of their current license. Now, I do see some people that'll utilize the temporary ones, the front and back paper one that they get for that quick little temporary. That's better than nothing. I would prefer you get an actual copy of their license, just so you can show that they do have it and they are carrying it. Remember, if a driver gets caught without their license, a ticket for that goes to the 383.51. That's one of the disqualifying offenses, failure to carry your license with you. In Table 2, if they get a ticket for that and a ticket for something else in the next 3 years, then they can get a 60-day suspension on their CDL. So again, we want to make sure that they do actually have a copy of that, and you want to make sure that you have a copy. Make sure you're getting front and back of the CDL and the driver's license. The new CDLs, all of the endorsements, restrictions, all of that is listed on the back of the license. So please make sure you're getting front and back. The next thing is the MVR, the motor vehicle records. Okay, now you notice in bold print, I says not run by insurance provider. Okay, that is because, I noticed this trend clear back when I was an enforcement officer and I was doing audits on companies. You would go in and ask for the MVRs, and you get that, oh, my insurance company runs those. Okay, well, let me see a copy. Oh, we don't have them. The insurance company maintains those copies. I'm telling you, folks, they do not. Okay, the insurance, they do have a program where they can run the drivers, and it's kind of like what you would see as a soft check. And it just kind of gives them a scoring to say, hey, this person's hireable, or I should say this person's insurable, and that type of thing. So you do want to make sure that you're getting an actual copy of it. Now, I don't care where you get your MVRs from. You can go to the state, you can get them. If you've got an insurance provider that's willing to run those and give them to you, hey, that's fine. If you come to my company, Front Range Compliance, and we run them for you, or if you set up your own third-party service and you're running them that way, I don't care how you get them. Whoever's providing those MVRs, they are the ones that are going to take issue with whoever's giving you those MVRs, because we're beholden to our contracts with them that we don't provide those documents outside of where we're permitted to. And almost all of your insurance companies are technically not permitted to provide MVRs. So again, make sure that you have some type of program set up where you're getting that MVR. Now, when it comes to the MVR for any drivers, you also have to be careful. A lot of individuals are going to the state of Colorado, and they're running the 7-year history, what they call a 7-year history MVR. And that is not an MVR, that is a driver's history. Okay, you have to actually run the MVR. And for CDL drivers, it absolutely, without a doubt, must show the medical card information on that. Now, when we run MVRs, of course, you're going to have your initial MVR. If you're having drivers bring a copy of that in, I'm not a big fan of that, because number one, I have seen drivers, drop those into a scanner. Almost every computer today that is manufactured, if you scan a document into it, they have the programs within that you can edit those documents. So I've seen edits done. I've also seen drivers get longer MVRs that are 7, 8 to 12 pages long, and you're not paying attention, and 2 or 3 pages are missing out of that document. So again, I'm not a big fan of that. Remember, your MVR has to be dated within 30 days of hire. Now, don't misinterpret that. That does not mean you get to hire somebody and you have 30 days to run their MVR. Before you put them in a truck, you have to know if they have a good, valid license. So make sure you're running that. Additionally, when we run into the MVRs, you have to run an annual MVR, once a year, whether you're following all of your employees. and their hire dates, or you just have, a date that you run the annual MVRs, that would be fine. That's how I would suggest the MVRs to be run. I prefer usually the middle of the month. That way, on the first, say the first Monday, of a month, you have a safety meeting. All of the drivers get the forms that you need to fill out. We always redo the MVR release form, and then the annual form where the driver goes through and lists out their violations. I call that the annual confessional form. And so once we bring the drivers to that, they write out any of their driving, their convictions, other than parking for the last year. And then you have that form. You run their MVR, say mid-month on the 15th. And then after that is run, then you complete what's called the annual review of the record. Now, the annual review, a lot of people are confused. What am I really checking? Why do I have to have the drivers write stuff down and then I pull the same report? We got a lot of companies that'll pull the MVR and then fill out the annual list for the driver. Just I don't do that. That's the process. It says right in the regulations that is the driver's responsibility to provide you that list once a year, and then you're going to confirm. You're going to check those violations against 383.51, probably a good regulation to write down, and then 391.15 for any potential disqualification. So if you see that you got a CDL driver that got, even if they're in their personal car, but they got like a following too closely ticket, you're going to want to pull them in and counsel them, because if they get another one of those tickets in 383.15, or I'm sorry, 383.51, then they're in jeopardy of a suspension for the next 3 years. So you want to make sure you have that conversation with them. Now, another thing that has happened, and this has kind of been going on since 2015, so hopefully everybody's aware of that, but you also need to run that MVR every time a medical card is renewed and been submitted. Usually they say within 15 days after submission to the state, just to ensure that the new medical card is attached to the license. So that's 3 or 4 MVRs, right? We've got the initial MVR, we've got the annual MVR, and then every time a medical card is renewed. So I guess that's 3 MVR. So again, just something to be aware of. Continuing from there, we've got the road test. Now on that road test, a lot of companies don't do the road test. They just are doing what's the term of equivalent for CDL drivers. And that's if you're hiring a CDL driver who's going to be driving CDL equipment, you don't have to do a road test. You can accept a copy of their license. Now, of course, there's an exception to that. And it says if they are if they're liquid tank, they don't qualify for that. And if they, are longer vehicle combinations, they don't qualify for that. So you would still have to do the road test. But if you're accepting the road test, remember, it's another reason why you always have to keep a valid copy of their license in the file to make sure that they're maintaining their endorsements, so on and so forth. Now, that term equivalent, the road test or equivalent, the equivalent is only for CDL drivers. It does not apply to regular licensed drivers. So if you have regular licensed drivers who are, driving your pickups and trailers, maybe they're half tons, maybe they're 3/4 tons, and they're pulling combinations, and they meet the definition of a commercial motor vehicle, which is why I gave you both those flow charts, because you got the Colorado commercial motor vehicles, which is 16,001 pounds, or you have the state or the federal one, which is 10,001. Okay, so if they run across the state line, it'll be a combination 10,001, which is pretty much a pickup today with any trailer, starting at the half tons and moving up. Of course, if it's just a really small trailer, you could stay under. But it's, like I said, the point I'm trying to get at is your non-CDL drivers absolutely have to have a road test on file. The next thing we have is the annual list of violations. Okay, I kind of ran through that just a minute ago, but we do want to make sure that we have that annual list and that annual review, the medical certificate or the long form. Now, for your, CDL, remember Colorado, I should say for non-CDL, Colorado does not require non-CDL drivers to have a DOT medical certification. But if they run across a state line, they absolutely, without a doubt, do have to have that medical certification. So don't confuse, what's going on here in Colorado to the federal regulations. If you cross that state line, the full regulations apply. With your non-CDL drivers, or I'm sorry, with your CDL drivers, we're definitely recommending that you are also obtaining a copy of that long form. Okay. There's a lot of debate. I've got people that tell me, no, that's a HIPAA violation. It is not a HIPAA violation. It will be a HIPAA violation, of course, if you leave their long forms out or give uncontrolled access to people and they access those forms. But if you have the controlled access, you're locking those files away like they're supposed to be and managing them correctly, it's good. Now, the reason you want to have the long form is because of the drug and alcohol testing requirements. When a test goes into further testing, that means they have found a substance that is in that individual's system. That substance, it may come back as a negative test. So you're going to get a result that says it's a negative test, found substance, amphetamines. Okay. You have to go back to the long form to check on the first page down on the very bottom of that box. That driver is required to list out their medications. If they did not go through and list out, say, Adderall in this scenario, then they need to go back in and get their medical card renewed, which with whatever drug is listed on there. And then the medical examiner has to qualify them knowing that they are taking that controlled substance. They're taking it legally, but they have to be cleared by a medical examiner to continue to drive. Now, the CDL driver, that medical card still has to be filed with the state. So I think everybody's good to go on that one. I will say on the Colorado My DMV online, they do have, when you go to driver services and you click down into that and you go down to the lower right-hand corner, there is a place to upload medical documents there. It's super slick. I definitely recommend you use that. If you're not familiar with it, shoot me an email and I'll show you how that works. Okay, the non-CDL driver is not required in Colorado, but the interstate medical certificate is required. Put a note on there for you. And then, of course, the verification of the medical examiners. Okay, the federal website, you can access that by going to the FMCSA website, or you can access it through your portal. If you go to the upper right-hand corner and scroll down to the bottom, it's generally covered up depending what's up in that box, that search bar box for the sites. But if you scroll down, you'll see the medical examiner verification. You can go to the website from there and then search for medical examiner. The point of that is to make sure that that medical examiner is still in good standing with the FMCSA and has not been cut out of the program. So that's kind of your basic foundation principle of a driver's qualification file, and I'm trying to put it in a nutshell. Definitely recommend, that you have e-files. If you're not building the e-files, and you know what, you're behind in this day and age. And it's hard to break those habits of saying, hey, we've got paper files or we've got electronic files. Definitely want to make sure that you have them. It's imperative that you get to electronic copy. It's going to help you be more organized. And it's going to also help you, if you get selected for an audit, speed up your audit process. Now, I've been through a many audits with Janelle Haney at the FMCSA. And Janelle, I use her for an example a lot because, Janelle is very thorough. She takes her time and she reviews everything to a T. If Janelle tells you she's going to be in your file in your office, you pretty much have to plan on 3 days. She's going to come in and camp out, and she's going to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Janelle will also review your driver qualification files. It might take her 2 days just to get through driver qualifications. Now, we have gone through many audits with the way we file things, and we get Janelle in and out of driver qualification files within a couple hours because we're able just to go through and just show her everything. It's right there. All the questions she's looking for, everything is organized and ready to go. So it's really imperative, that you start moving forward, and getting your files documented. Having everything electronic is going to help you to be more organized. Now, some of the scanners that I recommend, I use Fujitsu scanners. I use the IX500. They've canceled that out. These are the replacements. I just kind of put an example down there on the bottom. I think you can buy them on Amazon, whatever else. But anyways, just food for thought. If you're using an old flatbed scanner, yeah, I feel sorry for you because they're extremely slow and it's going to be a total pain. Those scanners that I just displayed, they're quick. They scan very quickly. They scan both front and back of documents, and you can just lay things in there and hit the button and it scans. So next thing you know is when you're organizing your e-files, number one, plan your document layout. Okay. You can go through and get a company, all your documents. If you don't name your documents right, if you don't file your document rights, right, they're going to be impossible to find. Just as an example, I went out to a client, was helping them get their program. We were out in Oklahoma working with this company. It was 150 a truck company. They were cargo tanks. They were hauling crude. And so we had hazmat involved also. And they were really proud that they went through and they had everything electronic. The only problem that we had is they didn't plan out how they were going to save their files. Everything was saved by the scanner name. So the scanner has its own sequence code and it saves by name. And we had something like 150 some thousand documents that we had to go through and file or define, and everything was scanned, but nothing was named. So we had to literally hand search, open file, close file, open file, and to the point that I just said, no, we need to scrap all these files and start over because this is taking forever. And then get their files organized. So again, make sure if you're gonna once you start to switch to electronic files, you got to plan it out. How are you going to plan your files and how are you going to lay out your documents? So plan your file names. Stay consistent with those file names. I had another company up here in Denver. They were really proud of themselves. They switched. I counseled them, got them all ready to go, and they saved all their documents. Well, they saved documents kind of crazy, like medical certification. They did med cert. And it was every document was named the same thing. So if it was a med card, they just saved it as med card. And again, yes, they did put these at least in a driver file, so an overall file with the driver's name. But the problem is when you're on the go and you need to find a file, you want to make sure that you have your documents, the files named the same, or else your search in the computer is not gonna locate the information. For instance, here at Front Range Compliance, we have thousands of driver files that we help companies manage. So sometimes we run into situations where drivers used to work for other clients, and we're doing safety performance histories for the new client, and we can go through, we can search for that driver instead of trying to remember all the companies that he's worked with. We could just search for that driver, and then it'll pull up all of their different files that we have. So again, get those files organized. Like I said, invest in a good scanner. Those desktop scanners are key, because they're going to help your staff be more efficient. If you say you've got a great copy machine that scans, that's great. But think of the time that it takes between, traveling between office to the copy machine or waiting. Somebody's in the middle of making copies, that kind of thing. Those do work. Okay. But again, we want our staff to be efficient. Having that desktop scanner will allow them to really scan, stay efficient with their work and that kind of thing. Again, those scanners can capture the front and back. Now, file structure, whether you're doing paper or you're not, when I say overall DOT compliance programs, we're dealing with a file structure and it just seems like the paperwork is endless, and it really can be. But when we go through and we look at really breaking it down to the foundation of what files you have to have, this screen displays the bullet points. I know there's a lot of information on this screen, but number one, I recommend an FMCSA file. That's where you're going to put all of your correspondence with the FMCSA, any later letters you get from if you go through an audit, any correspondence, whether it's from the Colorado State Patrol or the FMCSA, save that in those documents. Okay, we'll talk about file name sequences, how to name your files here in a minute to help you find stuff so that you don't just end up with a disorganized file. For instance, your FMCSA PIN number, that number is critical to remember. You want to probably save that as FMCSA PIN, so that you can find it instantaneously. Your accident files in your accident register, okay, insurance files, and not a lot goes in that file, but it's great to have it organized because I've lost count of how many times I go into companies, they're getting ready for an audit, and it's like, hey, where's a copy of your MCS 90? And they don't even know what it is. They can't find it. So we had to have those documents specifically set up in this file. If you're a for-hire company, a hazmat company, if you're a freight forwarder, if you have a freight forwarder business or a passenger carrier, you got to have that MCS 90 on file. The next thing would be your driver's qualification files, and I'll show you how to do that file sequence here in just a moment. Drug and alcohol testing. Now, drug and alcohol testing program, okay, you're not going to have the program in each of the driver's files. So it's probably important because you're going to have correspondence with your TPA. I know with our TPA, we're sending them the statistical reports, we're sending them their certificates of enrollments, things like that. I want all that correspondence in one file. The drug and alcohol, we could probably move that to the driver's file. Again, if these are public files, it's got to be controlled access. So if you're setting this up on a server, you're probably going to only want to grant certain access to certain people. The next thing we have is your hours of service files. Now, with the ELD, that this file has drastically shortened. But if you're doing short haul, again, you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping those documents and the supporting documents. There's certain things you're still going to want to be keeping for each driver for at least 6 months. So hours of service file, to where you're going to save all that information so that you can keep yourself organized. And then we run into your vehicle maintenance file. Again, every vehicle, every trailer, everything in your fleet that's rolling has to have it. That's whether it's owned, leased, or used by. Okay, now if it's a short lease, less than 30 days, yes, you don't have to build a maintenance file for it. But if it's a term lease or longer than 30 days, then yes, you absolutely have to have a maintenance file for it. Even if enterprise is doing the work on a truck, you have to gather all that to show that you're doing that maintenance. And then if you're a hazardous material company, again, everything you need to have for that program, I could probably speak for you for 4 hours just on that file alone. And then from there, policies and procedures, and then training. You do need to have a training file. Now, training files all too often are just simply a sign-in sheet, and it shows that individual signed in. Okay, the training file, the actual trainings that drivers go through, I would put that in that driver's file so you can find it specifically. But when we see that the driver has that training, a training file is great because then you can support and you can show the evidence of what your training is. So make sure that you have some type of file that'll go through and show that. Now I'm trying to speed through this. I know I'm kind of at my time limit here. We just got a couple more slides to get through this. Now the file structure, okay, so we've got the files. Those are the files that you have to have. How to go through and structure a file, and using the example of driver qualification is number one. So it would start out in your file browser. You would have driver qualification files wherever you're saving that, and then you would go into it from there. Open up that file. Okay, we don't want to have just an endless open of files. I've seen companies that have gone through and open up a driver's file, and then they have a file for a medical card, and all the medical cards go in that one. They have a file for MVRs, and we don't need to do that. So we go a file for drivers, driver qualification, and then from there we will have our list of drivers. Okay, and then as you open that each driver's file, then we have the list of documents within there. No more sub files unless you absolutely have to. But how we would go through then is we would save the documents by their file names. For instance, the driver's qualification file. I like to typically group that file all together. If you want to sort it, there are great reasons to sort it. For instance, having the employment history separated from those documents, that's very helpful when you're confirming, when you're looking at it to confirm that the driver's employment dates are correct, so you don't have to open up the other file. I don't care necessarily how you do it, but again, when you set up your plan and you're going to do it a specific way, do every driver that way, and every file that way, because then it's going to be set up for you. So as we go through and we do the driver's qualification file, my file naming sequence is always going to start with the abbreviated name of what the document is, followed by the driver's name, and then the date that document was created or signed, or the date of expiration, such as a license or a medical card. I'll use an expiration date on there. Okay, now the reason that I don't use driver name first is because when I open up the browser to look at the screen, if it's all the driver names first, that's all I'm going to see, because usually the window will shorten it. The file name's still there, but you can't see everything. If I open up, say, John Smith's driver file, and it's listed as DQF, I know exactly what that is, or DQ, I know exactly what that is. If I see the term CDLA, I know that that's a Class A CDL. If I see the term CDLB, I know that's a Class B, but I can also see the expiration date. So those are going to be all grouped together. Your computer will automatically do that for you. So again, by the naming sequences. So these are the names that I would go through and use. CDL, I use CDLA, driver name, and the expiration date. MVR, okay, I don't list if it's an annual, I just put MVR in there, okay, because you're going to see the dates, so you're going to know which one's the initial MVR and then which one are the older ones. You always want to try to keep the original hiring documents. You are allowed to purge MVRs that are over 3 years old, but keep that original one just to show that you have maintained them. Now, I'm not going to go through all these just for the sake of times. I will make this presentation. I'll send this on so we can send it out, a copy of it out to y'all. But again, we want to go through and use these naming sequences so that we can find them. So you can see on this page, I did bold out those naming sequences. Another example of how to do, say, a vehicle maintenance file electronically is going to be an electronic, and we're going to have vehicle maintenance files. And then from there, we'll break down, we'll have another file per unit number, or, however we classify our vehicles, we'll have unit number file, and then documents saved within that, those documents with the name, such as an annual inspection. You can use periodic inspection, you can use annual inspection. It's totally up to you. As long as you're consistent, you do it the same. So for an annual inspection, I typically will put an INSP, the unit number, and the date that it was completed. DVIRs, okay, remember, you only have to maintain the DVIRs that have a defect on them, and it's really important that you're doing that. So DVIRs are critical just to make sure drivers are doing good pre-trips. Almost every roadside inspection with violations falls back to the driver not doing a good pre-trip. Okay, so again, you want to make sure your DVIR program is on point and you're tracking them. If you're using electronic DVIRs in a system, that's fine. Obviously, you wouldn't be scanning these, but you got to be maintaining that program and following through on those DVIRs. PM program, if you do a repair receipt, that's send somebody for the tire shot and you just get a receipt back. Or if you're doing the repairs internally. Now, if you have a maintenance program and you're doing that, that's great. But a lot of smaller companies specifically don't invest in maintenance programs, but we need to help them get organized. And then you're going to have an additional file outside of the vehicle maintenance for your inspector qualifications. So you might have a qualification for annual inspector. So I might say P-qual. So I know that I have the qualifications to do the periodic annuals. Or I might have a B-qual, which means that they're brake qualified. So again, make sure that you have those for anybody that has done an annual for you. Even if you're using an outside source, you need to confirm and get a copy of their qualifications. And then roadside inspections. Okay, roadside inspections are still they're stored throughout the vehicle file or throughout the filing systems. We want to bring those in, get them grouped together so that you can find them all together. So save those inspection. I use INSP, the unit number, and the date. Okay, if you want to use it by driver number, yeah, you can do that. But if it's a driver inspection with driver violations, I'd probably save it by driver. But if it's a vehicle inspection and it's hitting the vehicle maintenance, I want to save it by unit number, because that way, when an enforcement officer says, show me all your roadside inspections for the last 365 days, we have them grouped together. But additionally, you want to be studying that information. Yes, that information is available in the CSA websites or the SMS, the safety measurement system, but it's only showing you the generic charging language. It doesn't show you what the officer wrote, which is critical information to help retrain or get your drivers back on point so that you can prevent any kinds of trends that are coming up. So you want to go through and correct that. Now, just really quick, last little slide here, just the hours of service update with your short haul. Remember, drivers, everybody has to have a time card. That's the biggest mistake now that I'm seeing, since we've got everything shifted for CDL drivers from 12 hours to an actual 14-hour day. A lot more people are using the short haul, which is great, but I'm still running into this. Let me see your time records. Well, so-and-so doesn't have a time record because they are salary. Look, the DOT doesn't care if they're salary, okay? If you're going to use short haul, your driver has to have a time record. No ifs, ands, or buts to it. The time record has to consist of the time they start, the time they stop, and their total hours. Okay. If your driver whose salary says, nope, by gosh, I am not using a time card, hey, that's cool. Welcome to ELDs. And they have to be on an ELD because they will no longer qualify for the time card. I'm not going to get too much into the short haul because I know I'm out of time. I will go ahead and now open this up for any questions that may have come in during the time here, or if you want to ask straight up front, you can unmute yourself. Do I have any questions that would like to be asked? So. All right, seems kind of quiet out there. I don't see any questions coming across. Again, if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out at info@frontrangecompliance.com. I will give a quick little plug here. DOT University, during COVID, the last couple months, before the first of the year 2021, we developed a YouTube channel to put some information out and some free training, make sure just giving some good information. So there's videos that you guys can view out there. Don't judge me by my number of subscribers. It's only a couple months old, but like I said, there's some videos there, some good training. And if you have an idea or want a video on something, reach out to me. I'd probably be more than happy to try to put something together for you. So again, you can check that out on YouTube or our website. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time today. Hopefully I gave you something that was helpful.